Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Google Hangout organized by the Knowledge Gateway for Women's Economic Empowerment in collaboration with the UN Global Compact. This morning, we are tackling the second topic in our Beijing+20 campaign. And this topic relates to the critical area of concern on women, power, and decision-making. As you who followed us on the Knowledge Gateway last month, we focused on the linkages between women's economic empowerment and women in the environment. This month, we are focusing now on the linkages between women's economic empowerment and women power and decision-making, which is very closely related, but often only tackled from the political sphere. And we want to bring attention to more on the economic side and the broader sustainable development agenda that we as the UN system and our partners are building up to 2015. And we hope that this conversation today will help kick off and some interesting discussions for our e-discussion that will start after the Google Hangout. And I would like to introduce Lauren Gula, who is our partner at the UN Global Compact, and she will also tell us a little bit more on why they think this topic is very important and why they joined us in co-organizing this Google Hangout.
Thanks very much, Anna. Yes, we're very pleased and thrilled to be co-hosting this interactive online event with you. For those that are unfamiliar with the Global Compact, we're the world's largest voluntary corporate sustainability initiative, and we're also a call to business everywhere to act responsibly and to take action in support of UN goals and priorities. And in 2010, we teamed up with UN Women to launch the Women's Empowerment Principles to further elaborate what the gender dimension of corporate sustainability is. And the principles provide 7 steps for business on how to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and community, and emphasize that women's participation and leadership is absolutely critical. So I think that there's kind of two complementary reasons that the Global Compact is really excited to be part of this today. First is that we recognize that women's participation and leadership is really critical, a critical component of corporate sustainability. And the other reason is that we recognize that in order to reach the goals outlined in the platform for action, business really has to be considered a stakeholder and to be part of the solution. So we're really excited for this discussion today. Thanks for including us. And I think, Anna, if you agree, I'm just going to jump in and shoot over the first question to Sarah, who's the coordinator of communication for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or commonly known as UNFCCC. Sarah, the United Nations will soon be launching Sustainable Development Goals to guide the development agenda. Why is women's leadership key to advancing sustainable development and addressing global issues such as climate change? And how is your organization working to promote women in leadership and in decision-making positions?
Thanks, Lauren. I'm really happy to be here. Hi, everyone. As Lauren said, my name is Sarah, and I work with the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat. And I specifically work on an initiative called Momentum for Change. And what Momentum for Change does is it shines a light on climate action that is happening all over the world. So every year we recognize action that's happening in cities, businesses, governments, other institutions, and we recognize sort of the best of the best, and we call these lighthouse activities. And we recognize the lighthouse activities at our annual UN Climate Conference. We really just want to show that action on climate change is already happening and to inspire others to take similar action. And our Momentum for Change initiative has 4 focus areas, and the one that's most relevant for today's conversation is our focus area called Women for Results. And what Women for Results does is we highlight women's leadership. As you said, Lauren, women's leadership is absolutely critical as we move toward developing sustainably, and especially in climate change. And our Women for Results focus area takes a look at women's leadership that's happening all over the world, in all countries all over the world. And we have great examples of women that are taking action and are leading on climate change. We have a whole great examples to tell you. I can tell you one or two quick examples from our Lighthouse activities from 2013. For example, in Ghana, there's an initiative called the Ghana Bamboo Bikes Initiative. And this is a women-led organization founded by a woman. And what they do is they build bicycles out of bamboo, which is a great solution to address climate change, both from the resources required to make the bicycles. So bamboo is a lot less carbon intensive than making steel bicycles, as well as the emissions from transportation. And the great thing about this initiative, and most of these women initiatives that we highlight, is it's not just addressing climate change, but it's also really fostering women's leadership. And so this Ghana Bamboo Bikes Initiative, it also hires women. So the women are working in this factory to create these bicycles. So there's a lot of really great spin-off benefits for women. Another great example I can tell you about is an organization called 1 Million Women, and this is based out of Australia. And they have a campaign to get 1 million women to take steps to reduce their carbon footprint in their everyday lives. They've already got over 100,000 women that have joined the campaign. I mean, the examples that I can share with you are endless, but women's leadership is not only critical, but we have great examples of women that are already leading on climate change.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to our second speaker. Naila Chaudhry, if you could introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about what you're doing. Naila is the CEO of Teleconsults Group from Bangladesh. And Naila, as a successful women business leader, how are you helping to create opportunities for young women in Bangladesh?
Hi, sorry, my video is not working. Our main mission is to enhance and provide necessary platform for full participation of girls and women in Bangladesh mainly, but now we are replicating the same project in Africa, Kenya, and in US itself. So our main focus is to ensure that we give them the pilot project, which is on in Bangladesh for last 2 years actually, which has gone live now, is to ensure that we address a segment of girls and women who are not in the social normal norm of life, because they're more battered women. And I deal with acid survivors in Bangladesh. Many of you, I'm sure you're aware of it. So where we've gone now is once they get treated, because their whole life changes and they're mutilated for life, we teach them skill in computer, ICT, and we are advancing those courses into software now also. So the earning from $50 is going up to almost $200 a month, which is a substantial amount of earning for a country like Bangladesh. But what we have added on is we are touching their family life, also bringing in sustainable projects into them by giving them nano credit. And another one is bringing like green energy into their life, teaching them how to use healthy ways of cooking and using solar lights and all that. So we brought in a whole different dimension to the project of only other than skill development. We are trying to teach them skills on how to lead a good family life once they go back into their home. So other than their earning, which we are also giving them loan through nano credit, and this nano credit we replicated from Kenya actually. Recently I was in Kenya, and these girls, once they learn skill, they need money also to get into entrepreneurship other than working in software. So we are trying to give them small loans through mobile app, airtime. So we got involved with this project in Africa, which is called Mode. They give nano credit through mobile airtime, partnering with telecom companies. So what they do is give monthly airtime, and the return is through projects and we teach them entrepreneurship, and they return with the business, the airtime. So thus they are economically empowered and not dependent on others. So the same thing we replicated with the acid survivor project in Bangladesh now. And next week we are going to do a pilot project giving them credits through phones, so that other than skill development and IT work, whether they can start their own business and be their own leaders and be example ambassadors in their area. And we are trying to replicate the same project. It's a little confusing in US as well. Recently, we did a survey. There are 4 million homeless and about 64 million immigrants who don't have full access to technology in US itself. So we have partnered with Better World Wireless, which I think, Anna, you heard a little bit about it, right?
Yes.
So bringing Bangladesh technology and Kenyan technology into America, we'll do 3 projects at a time in Kenya, US, and Bangladesh, trying to see what works out. If we customize it a little, the whole thing can be replicated anywhere globally. And since it worked in Bangladesh and Kenya, we are very hopeful it will work in US as well. And we see people like TechSoup and Microsoft coming forward promising 1 million handsets to Better World Wireless. So we thought if we do nano credit with them, we could reach out to 4 million homeless in US. And our target is women and girls again. So we will do the similar project and enhance Bangladesh, my core project, with that also. So feel free to ask me questions. It's too short a time to describe the many things we are doing together. But it is core focus is economic empowerment of women, while we teach them skill to ensure they get money in hand to start their own business also, and create employment instead of asking for employment. That is the main focus, you know. Even if they have one person, you know, supporting them, that would be creating employment instead of asking for employment. So that is the main focus we try to give them.
Great. Thank you so much, Naila. There will be plenty of opportunities for our participants to ask questions, and then we can have another round of discussions. But you have talked about Kenya, so I think it's time to let Florence in to the discussion and talk a little bit about what the African Center for Transformation and Inclusive Leadership is doing for women's capacity to lead and be part of this decision making. And if you can also, Florence, provide some examples on how you've been successful in Kenya or more broader in Eastern and Southern Africa. Florence Botegwa, over to you.
Thank you very much, and really congratulations on the initiative. Just excited to be participating. I just want to start by introducing the African Center for Transformation and Inclusive Leadership. This is an initiative of UN Women in partnership with the Kenyatta University. The center comes from the realization or the dialogue that preceded the African Union and African government celebrating 50 years of independence, 50 years of cooperation under the African Union, and the realization that actually Africa is a rich country. It has incredible resources. It has human resources in terms of a very big young population. That has benefited from education over the last few decades, that the direct investment from overseas and from Africans in the diaspora is increasing and overtaking ODA. And the question was then, why was Africa hosting 30%, more than 30% of the world's poor people? And the kind of response that came up is that the leadership that we have is not able to translate the resources we have and the opportunities we have into sustainable development. It is not able to make sure that the economic growth that has happened over the last decade, that in many cases exceeds the growth in many other developed countries, to translate that into a reduction of poverty across different levels. So what we have is income inequalities widening. So what UN Women and Kenyatta University have done is set up this center that tries to look at a solution for that leadership gap. and not just the numbers, because UN Women has been supporting over the years the programs for women to get into leadership positions. And if you look at the statistics on representation in parliament, Africa is doing reasonably okay compared with some of the other geographical regions. But even having those numbers of women in parliament and other decision-making positions have not led to the change, the transformation of the agendas and laying the foundation for sustainable development. So at the African Center, we are looking at developing a different kind of leadership that is driven by clear values, that is able to move constituencies and communities with them and empower those communities for sustainable development. So far, the center has trained leaders, both women and men, but the focus is more on women and young leaders of both sexes from 8 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. It is an exciting program that is non-traditional. We are looking at starting with the transformation of the mindset of our people and of our leaders, and how they can begin to look at opportunities and development from a different perspective that is not so self-centered, that is not driven by corrupt tendencies and so on. And I'm telling you, hello, oh my goodness. Yeah, we seem to have an invasion of a huge truck. Yeah. Well, so what is happening is that we are beginning to see the impact of our work. Even if the center is just less than 2 years old, we've got participants that have graduated from the training and have gone back into their communities and are doing incredibly very well. I will give you just a few examples. We've got a participant from Kenya who is actually a member of parliament. And maybe to understand what this is about, the structure of the program is that they come and go through a face-to-face training program, at the end of which each participant develops an action plan as a way of putting in practice what they've learned. The action plan has 2 parts. One for self-development in those areas that they will have identified in which they need to strengthen as leaders. And then the other is the transformation of the societies or institutions in which they are. And that is followed by an 8 months mentorship program in which they are working with a mentor who supports them in that journey of being transformational leaders in a context in which the people around them have not benefited from the program. And then they would come back for the final review and sharing. So the person that I want to share about did her success plan and decided that rather than trying to transform parliament, she wanted to go back to her community, the constituencies she raises, and work on the community mindset for them to realize the riches within the community itself, and that they can move together and develop infrastructures and make demands on their governments as a community. And she has succeeded beyond our wildest beliefs, because now she has a community of over 60 of over a community that has a membership of about 200,000 people, but 60% of whom, in terms of the adults, have signed up to join together, to work together with their member of parliament to develop structures and economic empowerment for them. It's a very rural community. But within 6 months of starting, they had started a community bank through their own savings without any outside interventions. The bank was already registered, meaning that it was able to conform with the stringent regulations in Kenya for such banks, and with that capital they are able to support individual households for economic activities. So you look at that and refer to the question where somebody was asking, can rural women with basic agricultural skills acquire financial wealth? Yes, they can, provided they have the leadership that can support to mobilize them, to bring in new ideas of how this is done, and to build the infrastructure for that support to happen. We had participants from Ethiopia, for instance, from government institutions. Ongoing back, they have gotten 4 sector ministries to work together to start the same kind of transformational leadership institute as an approach that the government of Ethiopia would like to use in developing leaderships within its cadre that can transform the communities in Ethiopia, because the country is trying to achieve middle income status in a few years to come. So we are seeing those very positive results. It is yet too young to see the impact and whether they are sustained, but it looks really good.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Yeah. I'm sure that we see a lot of questions coming in. I think there will be a lot of questions on this. This is amazing progress, and I think it's a different approach where you're looking at the transformation of society. It's not only about the leader as an individual, but as a community and how we can make that change. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
We're now going to turn to, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Pusuletso Matete. Are you there? We're just going to double check. We had some connection problems, and if not, then we can return to her if she's able to get back online. Pusuletso, can you hear us? No. Okay, so we will return. No problem at all. So Jody, let's turn it over to you then. And Jody is the Senior Vice President of Business Development at the Anita Borg Institute, which is a social enterprise focused on advancing women's participation in leadership and technology. So Jody, we all know that the technology sector is male-dominated, but beyond being the right thing to do, why is it important to advance women's participation in leadership and technology, and what are the greatest barriers, and what is Anita Borg Institute doing? I know that there's multiple questions in there, but hopefully you can kind of bring them all together.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank not only the panelists, but I want to thank the questions that are being submitted, which are fascinating. So So the Anita Borg Institute works on behalf of individual women in technology, so computer scientists and software engineers and women that create technology and the organizations that support them. So there is an interesting phenomena that is going on in Silicon Valley with a number of very influential multinationals. Google, Yahoo, Facebook, they're all releasing their workforce diversity statistics publicly. So they have, and if you've seen it over the past month, Intel has done it as well. They all release their workforce stats. And I think the reason that this is occurring, I don't think it's greenwashing, I don't think it's anything like that. I think more and more the study of innovation is really confirming that the most innovative teams are often the most diverse teams. That diversity really enhances innovation. And I look at the issue and the work that we do, particularly around ICTs and science, technology, engineering, and math, from an innovation point of view. What does it take to be innovative? And so I think that for me is the most important area, which is I look at innovation. So I look at these wonderful companies that are working on innovation, and I look at the depth of innovative teams. So the UNITA Borg Institute does a couple of things in terms of fostering innovation. One of them is that we have the largest convening of women in technology. You could almost think of us as a little bit of a boutique organization because we really focus on ICT and computer science. That's really what our area of focus is. So if you look at science, technology, engineering, and math, we work on the technology and engineering portion of it because it is. So to frame this conversation about innovation, if you look at the future predictors, Frost and Sullivan is a really well-known one. All of the trends through 2020 or 2025 require extraordinary technical expertise. If you look at the emergence of smart technology, the emergence of mobile technology, the emergence of zero-based energy, of smart grids, technology and ICT expertise is in all of these now, and so we want as many women as we can get working in this area. And there are a host of issues that women face, which I'll talk a little bit about, but more I want to talk about why innovation is so important and some of the really interesting things that are being done. So you're now seeing, specifically in technology companies, that practices that include blind resume screening. So for example, you submit a resume and no one knows what your gender is, what your nationality is. All that they can do is look at your area of technical expertise. The MacArthur Foundation did a study years ago where they asked 500,000 people to envision what a technology worker was, and 80% of them, 75% of them envisioned a male, a white male. So you've got this, so you have this persistent bias, this persistent stereotyping of what it means to be a technologist. And so what women do is they face a couple of pretty substantive issues. One is having access to the networks. I mean, if you look at any women in power, anyone in power, what is one of the biggest things that they have? They have networks that help facilitate that. So women are often not included in networks. Women often don't see models of other women that have succeeded at a place that they need to be. It's well documented that women make substantively less than men do. But what I think is really important is in the workplace, 62% of women's ideas are not endorsed, and 75% are not implemented. So if you look at innovation, you've got all of these ideas and innovation in these companies that are still heavily male-dominated, and women can't figure out how to get their ideas heard, where to get their ideas promoted, how to get their ideas implemented. And so we work in that area, trying to help both the individual women and the companies that hire them. So our programs go in two different directions. One of them for companies is called the Top Company for Women in Computing, and I am a firm believer in what you measure you will change. If you don't measure it, you can't change it. And so we go in and we have a set of benchmarks where companies apply for this, and we consider everyone that applies for it a winner. There's no because you're willing to go into your company and look at, what does my workforce look like? What are my promotion rates look like? You'll talk to someone and they'll often think, we're doing great. We're recruiting lots and lots and lots of women computer scientists. And what they don't realize is 3 years later, they have a revolving door in their company and the people are leaving. And then we work with individual women. The area of the pipeline that we work with the most is undergraduate through senior level women in computing. And we have programs and all kinds of things for these women in order to stay in their jobs, especially when it gets tough. Stay in their jobs when they're the only woman on a team. What are the tools that they need when they may be the only woman working on a particular team, a very male-dominated team? What are things that they can use in this emergence of what's called loosely in the United States a programmer culture? You're seeing a little bit of, well, you see a lot of backlash against women. So we have, our programs are principally based in the United States or in India, although in both of those locations we pull from countries around the world. And so we have what is known as a Women's Entrepreneur Quest in India. It was the first ever women's only pitch session. And so hundreds of women submit a business plan for their businesses, and we winnow it down to 6, and then whoever wins the particular award, we give them some financial investment to go off and run their business. And so one of the winners, our first ever winner, took the money. It was 2 lakhs, so $10,000, and put it in the bank and ran her company. And every time she got to a place in her company where she thought, okay, I'm going to fail, or my business is going to go under, or I don't have the money, she'd say, well, I'm going to make this choice because I have this money in the bank, and if something happens, I can pull on the money in the bank. And she never had to use that money. She made all of these really smart choices. She's built her business, and last year indicated that she was going to give that money back to the next woman entrepreneur. So those are the things that we do. I mean, we work really looking to keep women in technical roles and to show them role models and networks and break the stereotypes down, because technology is, from an economic point of view, probably the job that could lift everyone. It's got more capacity for wealth building, or even not even wealth building, for building of equity. So those are the things that we do. And so
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? I'm just seeing something on the question board here.
Sure.
You know, maternity leave is a really is one of the challenges that is highlighted by a number of industries and companies. And does Anita Bork have any suggestions or ideas on how companies can ensure that women can return to work successfully after being on maternity leave?
Absolutely. One of the things that you're seeing, some of the best practices, is Google as a company has a remarkable flexibility and return to work program. But some of the best practices that you see are keeping women in the networks even when they're on maternity leave, keeping them engaged in the company. You're seeing a very interesting program emerging. I just started reading about it, and I'll get a little bit more information and share it in one of the follow-ups or on the about mother coders. That's what it's called, mother coders. So you're looking at women that they leave technology. Women leave technology at 50%, and they leave it because of childcare, because of maternity, because the environment is not particularly supportive of them, and there is such a shortage of women in computing and technical women that you are seeing these programs emerge like mother coders that are taking women that have left the workforce and reintroducing them so they can code. You are seeing flexible work policies. You are seeing this building of networks so that women are continually engaged even when they're on maternity leave. You're seeing some really, I think, really interesting practices.
Great, thanks so much. I think some of these strategies and ideas are very relevant to a number of different industries, public or private. And I'm seeing another question on here about the oil industry in Kenya and what steps that companies can take. And I think that some of the practices that you just mentioned would be relevant, especially considering that they're both very non-traditional jobs for women. Should we see if
we have? Yeah, no, she's not.
Okay. Okay.
No, she was the one with the vote. So that we had some technical issues with Butseletzer from South Africa, but we'll move on with the final expert to join us in this conversation, Maya Morsi from UNDP in Cairo. If you could briefly introduce yourself, and then our question to you is, from your perspective, what are the key challenges that women have in your region to become leaders and be part of decision making? And you can share also some of the good practices that could potentially be picked up by other countries and regions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you again for the excellent initiative. As you said, my name is Maya Morsi. I'm the gender practice team leader in the regional center in Cairo, covering the 18 Arab countries of the 22 Arab countries of the League of Arab States. I think coming back to your question, what are the challenges facing women? I think what is here in the Arab region is not specifically for the Arab region, but it is the challenges facing women in the whole world. You can add to it which the conservative dynamics or the conservative explanation of women economic empowerment. We here in the Arab region, you have contextual obstacles like the educational choices or traditional views of and the stereotypes about women and their work environment, the economic obstacles like access to resources and land and credit, and the soft obstacles, which is mainly within the business network and the lack of the business training within the region. It's extremely important to highlight that through the past 3 years and with the Arab Spring, there is a change in the dynamics of women in decision making or women in power, especially with the rise of this conservative power saying that women in the Islamic Sharia or in the Islamic jurisprudence are not allowed to go out of their homes. And actually what they are using is not related to the right understanding of the Islamic Sharia or jurisprudence. It is the total opposite, that women in Islam has the total right to have financial independency. And this is extremely important. And what we are keeping on saying and mentioning is economic dependency is fully allowed in the Islamic Sharia. We had done in the past couple of years and several initiatives in the Arab region. I will start with the policy dynamics, which is the gender economic measurement initiative, and planning in Bahrain. It started in Bahrain to have a master's course and a policy course for women and men policymakers related to all the package of gender in economic empowerment, gender and trade, poverty, macroeconomic and development strategies, responsive economic policies, gender and climate change, gender and trade. And this is trying to come up with a pool of experts that can push the policy dynamics and the policy framework in the Arab region towards a gender responsive policy framework at large. We had done after this year what we call the Musharaka initiative, which is the participation initiative at large. It has one of its pillars, the economic participation and women in decision making, which highlighted some initiatives that is needed to be taken by the Arab region, and I think it could fit also other regions. Which what main interesting recommendation was establishing an observatory on women and employment, which we are missing in the Arab region. What is facing women, the problems that is facing women in the employment, not only research and studies, but they want like an ombudsperson to collect complaints and to know the real problems of women in the employment sector, in all sectors, especially in the decision making. Another interesting suggestion was to come up with evidence-based research on the difference between men and women in working conditions and salaries, because whenever we're raising the issue of equality in salaries and equality in opportunities in here, the government, the first thing they say that it is on equal pay basis and there is no discrimination. But when things are coming into practice, there is still discrimination on the ground. Of course, as the last expert said, that there is a problem in infrastructure and services required for women, multiple roles. This is another also strong recommendation that come in the consultation, plus the legislative reform. Coming back to the multiple role of women here in the region, it is coming up with a policy of maternity taking 16 weeks or 3 months leave is not only the solution, because it's extremely important, as my colleague said, that we have a return policy. Women might be staying more than 2 years taking care of the children, and coming back to the job market is extremely difficult. The last initiative that we are working on is the Gender Equality Seal, which we are applying right now within the UNDP country offices to push women and to ensure that there is gender parity as well in programming, in reach out, in communication, in management, and in decision making. And this sealing process or certification process, we are encouraging our government counterparts as well to take part and apply it on the ground. One of the major problems, and I will say it from experience here in the Arab region, is the only women syndrome, as we call it, the only women syndrome in a decision-making environment, or the only women syndrome in the cabinet. We are seeing a trend that when women reach this decision-making position, they are not creating a chain effect. They are not pushing or pulling other women and establishing a strong network or a critical mass. And this is something, I think it's not only in the Arab region, but it might be already in other countries. But how to create a critical mass and networks beyond among women is extremely a big challenge here in the Arab region.
Thank you so much, Maya. This was very insightful, and I was just asking my colleague here, we had a story, an update on the Gender Equality Seal and the great work that UNDP is doing in that area on the Gateway a few months ago. But we can, if people are interested, we can direct them to the story and to share the whole concept of this Gender Equality Seal that UNDP is taking the lead and integrating into the whole organization. We thought that we'd go through all the questions that we have received, and you, the experts, if you could please give us an indication on which ones you would like to respond to. There is a lot of questions, so we hope that we can go through them all. Some of them are related to technology on the issues that Jody was talking about. Some of them about rural women. So there's a variety of different questions. Maybe what we can start with, Lauren, is the question from Ghana, which just jumped off, that talks about how we can engage. So there are a few questions on how do we engage men and men leaders into this space. So one is coming from Ghana, and how do any of you have experience engaging with male traditional leaders? And to help shatter the glass ceiling. And there has this Faustina from Ghana is saying that we as women, we are nominating and installing the chiefs, but then the role ends there. So what can we do about that?
I'd like to respond to that.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is a question from John Wafula. Thank you very much for that very important question. UN Women has just launched a campaign, the He for She campaign, that comes from from a realization that for transformation to happen, for the promise of Beijing, the Beijing platform to really happen, we've got to work together, men and women. In the African Center for Transformation and Inclusive Leadership, this is one of the areas that we really focus on. To see that in social transformation, you are talking about society. We need to go beyond looking at issues as belonging to women, but rather as issues of the entire society. So, for instance, in Malawi, our last participants chose as their action plan to work with the traditional chiefs in accelerating the implementation of strategies for reducing maternal mortality. Malawi is one of those countries that really had a very high maternal mortality rate. And they've succeeded beyond all belief, and the government has adopted this as one of their strategies in working with the traditional rulers, who are mainly men, to drive the campaign for accelerated reduction of maternal mortality. Regarding the second question that is included there, where in Africa, generally, women play a role in the nomination and installation of chiefs, traditional leaders. Traditionally, their role would stop there, but no longer that is the case. When you look at, for instance, Queen Nana in Ghana, is leading a whole social movement that is using positive cultures for social sustainable development and for addressing some of the negative aspects of the culture among her communities. The Queen of Buganda, Queen Nabagereka, is another example where she is a traditional female leader and is rising beyond the traditional role they were expecting to play, to transform and build on positive cultures for the entire community. In fact, now there is a network which is called the African Queens and Women Cultural Leaders Network, that is working with the African Center for Transformational Leadership and has the support of several UN organizations to begin to institutionalize this, so that we don't see just a few female traditional leaders working on development and on transforming negative social attitudes, but actually doing it at a national level in a very structured way that is recognized as leadership and that receives government support.
Thank you so much, Florence. Somebody else, I think Jody, Maya, after that.
One of the things that we're seeing is this growth of what are known as male advocates. So you're seeing, so at our conference that's coming up, we're going to have a panel of male advocates that will, the panel will be moderated by a woman CEO, and the panelists are all men. There'll be I believe the CTO of Facebook, the CEO of GoDaddy, and perhaps the CTO of Intuit. I don't know if he's confirmed yet or not, but all of these are called male allies. And what do they know that they can communicate back to the women that they work with, so that they understand, so that this notion of sponsoring and what allies works for, what it means, and how can male allies promote women into their networks, into their groups, in order for women to move forward and succeed. So you're seeing that. You're also seeing, I wanted to go back to that, the little bit of conversation that we were having about maternity leaves, where you're seeing companies now offering maternity leave to men and women. So everybody gets to take 8 weeks. People are giving baby bonuses in support of men and women. And so those kinds of things, the more that you can pull men into the conversation, the more robust the solutions are.
Thank you so much. Maya?
Yeah, I think engagement of male traditional leaders in the society at large, they have to see a benefit, a direct benefit from the engagement, and a direct benefit to the whole society. And on the other side, they should see as well a strong women network or critical mass, a group of women that are pushing for a certain agenda. And if, from our experience, if they notice that there are cracks, as we're saying, there is cracks in the glass ceiling, if they notice that there are cracks in this group of women motivators talking about a certain issue, this is when the traditional male leaders play a game. And if they see that they have a certain demand, a certain agenda, and women are crystal clear, strong on what they are demanding, in most of the times they are supported, in addition, not only being traditional, but religious leaders. And in the region, and I think in several countries as well, traditional male leaders are combined with being a religious male leader who are actually seen, heard, and has a strong influence in the community. So influencing the religious male leaders is extremely important, with coming up, as we discussed in one of our regional consultation, with strong women religious leaders to have a balance in the power, and come up with another set of terminologies, another way of thinking that could push the agenda further. So we have to balance the power between these traditional religious male leaders and women religious leaders as well.
Thank you so much, Maya. We also have a question about how to tackle this when the girls are very young. For example, at the age of 12, when they're becoming more conscious about themselves and might still believe in their leadership qualities. Or how can we tackle this and to make sure that these young girls are kept motivated to become leaders and decision makers?
And maybe to add to that, how can we tackle the stereotypes for men as well? Tackle from the other end as well, and have boys on board the idea of gender equality in women's leadership.
Maya?
Yes, I will give you a small experiment that was done in one of the schools here. Actually, it's a German school, and they took certain grades for girls and boys, and they had done a lot of simulation on certain platforms like the United Nations, the League of Arab States, the ECOSOC, and they kept on having girls moving up like the model United Nations somehow inside these platforms. And they had another simulation for companies that are winning, buying, selling, and producing certain products. These young girls and young boys, actually, it was when they had passed through this early experience and early discussion throughout a certain set of age, when you see them, they are growing up, when they have an employment interview, they are different. They are tackling these issues since young age, not facing with an interview or a discussion or power on or different stereotypes when they are older. So tackling these issues from an early age through school education is extremely important, and it had proven some success in some countries as well.
Thank you so much, Maya. We have a lot of questions. We are trying to see if we can cluster them into different thematic areas. So there's a lot of things that came up on the maternity leave. There's one question: what is done with women working in industry reliant on short-term contracts when they take maternity leave, and how would that help them when they get pregnant and get on maternity leave and allow them to come back? Somebody who wants to tackle
whether they are able to come back at all.
Is there any practices that have enabled that? Maybe we can take another one. Maternity leave is only one part of the barrier for women in technology. From my own experience, one of the greatest challenges in a tech company is the role that it often is the 24/7 role. When codes break, servers are down, a website crashes, you are needed pronto.
I think this is also something that very much applies to women entrepreneurs as well. Work doesn't stop when they have children. So to think about the dual role that women play, and how business can support that, but more broadly, how can society support women so that they can lead.
Yeah, no, I think it is an issue. I read a study, I think it was from India, where the graduates from universities come in. Women and men have the same salaries, but because of women's limitation of moving around and the flexibility and mobility, they, after 5 years, the salaries, there was a huge gap in their salaries between women and men because of that lack of mobility and ability to be on duty 24/7. Judy, do you have anything to add, or we'll move on to?
No, I think one of the things that comes up the most often, though, that you're right about is women can start out at equal salaries, and because workplaces are not flexible, women's salaries pull farther back and farther back and farther back from men's salaries, and so women leave technology careers at 50%. They're gone, and one of the biggest things is this notion, what that question very eloquently asked, which is, what is considered work-life integration? If you're working on a project, and what tools are offered by companies that allow you to balance your children, balance your family, balance your work? And you're seeing some forward-thinking companies tackle this, but I think it's one of the biggest issues, and many, many companies are looking at, how do we do this? Because if the servers are down or if the profits are sliding, it seems like all of the best practices just fall away, and it's like, do this job, work at night. And so they really, I do think they really are looking at what are the best practices in order to include women. And include all their workers, not just women, men. And nobody wants to be working at midnight when the servers are down. Nobody wants that life. So.
Great. There are a few questions. Some of our participants are asking, what can I do to contribute to bettering women's role in decision-making and leadership? There are also a question about which country has the highest percentage of female politicians. I believe that is in Africa, so maybe I don't know if you want to kind of tackle that.
Rwanda has the highest so far, which is 64% representation in parliament. Incredible achievement. But when you look at the average in Africa, the average is 22%. We have quite a number of countries that have gone beyond the 30% threshold that is in the Beijing platform for action. But we are also noticing some countries sliding back in recent elections where women are losing out on in terms of results of the elections. A lot of these numbers, though, are based on affirmative action measures, where countries have instituted either through legislation or through other policy measures, quotas for women or special seats for women. We haven't seen a lot of movement in terms of women contesting successfully open seats. So there is a problem. It means that the barriers to women's participation in politics, in competitive politics, have not been removed. Women are not able to sustain that edge. Even those who have been in parliament on the quota system, if after 2 successful terms in parliament they contest on a general seat, they invariably lose. And there is also a concern that in some countries there is a debate that is going on whether affirmative action measures have worked, since these women are not able to transition from those protected seats to the general seats. So the numbers are deceptive, at least in the Africa context.
Thank you so much. Anybody else would like to add something to that? There are a few questions to ask here at UN Women on how we are engaging in the lead up to the Beijing+20 and engaging civil society. So we have different different activities leading up to 2015. This is what we do on the Knowledge Gateway, is specifically on economic empowerment. Around this, we have Google Hangouts, we have e-discussions, but these are, of course, for people who are connected to the internet. At the same time, UN Women in our regions, in our country offices, we have offices in more than 70 countries, are engaging already with civil society and are preparing, together with the governments, the review of the 20-year review of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So activities are happening at all levels, at the national, regional, and global levels. And we have specific debates here on the Knowledge Gateway that as it relates to women's economic empowerment. So thank you so much for these questions and for allowing us to elaborate a little bit more on all the activities that UN Women is doing. And we hope that all of you that are participating today will also contribute additionally in the e-discussion that will kick off after this Google Hangout. And it will go on for 3 weeks, and there will be a lot of opportunities to come in and discuss this topic. We are also reaching out to UN Women, have civil society advisory groups, and 200 advisors from civil society that we have invited to also join us in this discussion on women's power and decision making. But back to a few questions. There are lots of them are coming in, and I hope that we'll be able to tackle. There is one, Catherine Schultz. Are legal quotas for women in parliament, local government, and corporate boards a good method for increasing women in leadership positions?
Really, very hotly debated topic.
Somebody wants to jump in on that one.
I already responded to some of these. I think it's out there. The jury is out there whether they are good or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe I can just jump in too to say that one panelist that was unable to connect, one thing that we were hoping she could speak about is a program in South Africa being run by Business and Professional Women South Africa, and it's to help women become ready for board positions, because one of the reasons cited for the reason that there aren't more women on boards is there aren't enough qualified women, and this is very focused on the private sector, but of course I think very relevant elsewhere as well. So having this type of capacity building and support in order to enable women to lead, to take on leadership positions is also really important. So unfortunately she was unable to join, but I do encourage everyone to check out that program.
Yeah, and I think that also, I don't think that these affirmative actions should be put in place by itself, but they have to come with also capacity building efforts. So for example, Norway was the first country that put a mandatory quota of 40% to have women in corporate boards. Otherwise, the companies had to be dissolved. It was a very radical, I think it was in 2004, something like that, that this law came in place. So what they also did, they put, for example, leadership classes and board management classes at the university level, so that these women are getting ready well in advance through the formal education system, and that they're also being guided into that. And I think that many of these efforts also come with these capacity building efforts to make sure that you are not, and that actually relates to the next question, which we have, if affirmative action work for or against women, because in most cases it's viewed as women being dished out as handouts as opposed to them earning their position. I don't know, it seems, Maya, you have maybe something to add to that, but I think it also links to how it is being set up, quotas, and what are the capacity building and education and training components that come with it.
First of all, I am pro the quota or the affirmative action 100%, but the how to design the affirmative action and implement it is actually the tool that is given to the other side to show that women, even if they are dashed in, even if they are in a big number, they are not performing as expected. Actually, if you see on the other side, men is not performing as expected as well. But the problem, because we are under this the screen and everyone is concentrating, if there is an affirmative action in one country, 30 women are entering into the parliament, what they are doing is a big issue. And it is extremely important that this affirmative action is combined with a strong capacity development program before entering to the parliament and while they are in the parliament. This is extremely important to first to have the capacity to show and to be strong women advocating for societal issues at large in the parliament, not only women's issues. Second, they have to see what the society has to see their impact on their agenda at large. Third, they have to show what is the added value of having more women in the parliament or in a decision-making position. And as I said, it has to be combined with a strong capacity development program and a mentoring, coaching, supporting program inside the parliament. My heart breaks when I say this, because on the other side, men are not actually doing the same. They are not involved in a capacity building program or other types. But the issue is that they have their networks of learning and gaining experience, their networks of lobbying and pushing issues in this decision making or the parliament. And women depends only on their capacity. This is why we put this as a strategy to push for a capacity development program with affirmative actions.
Thank you so much, Maya. Your passion is coming through very clearly.
Can I add on to that question also? Capacity building, yes, is very important, that we back the quotas, the provisions for quotas and special measures with the capacity building. But on the other hand, as I said earlier, it's not normally a question that the majority of these women have no capacity, because even with the quota system, they go through a rigorous campaign period. They are very qualified women. They perform very well in parliament. So it is the underlying masculinities and stereotyping that mean they will not perform outside that protective measure. And I think you asked whether it works for women or not, because of the tendency to ridicule the fact that they were handed these positions. It also depends on the attitude that the women and the civil society in the country adopt. I've seen, for instance, in Uganda, where the men initially, when we got affirmative action measures, they were like, yeah, this is the ghetto, you are not real members of parliament. And the women's argument was that, wait a minute, we represent even larger numbers, because the men represent a constituency which is smaller, whereas the women were representing a district which has 3 or 4 constituencies. So their argument was that they had a superior legitimacy in parliament because they represented a larger number, and in fact mobilized to demand that the individual male members of parliament account to them. And that changed the dialogue completely. So it is also, and I think this is where UN Women is approaching the whole participation question from a leadership point of view, that women in these positions have to go beyond the position of authority they have to use leadership skills and approaches to make sure that they have impact, and also they get the recognition for what they are doing.
Mm-hmm. Can I also jump in on the capacity building, because I think this is really critically important, and the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, the negotiating process really recognizes capacity building, particularly in building leadership skills and negotiating skills among women is critically important. In 2012 in Doha, Qatar, at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, we always have a big annual conference every year at the end of the year, which is where a lot of the negotiations on climate change happen. Something really historic happened in 2012, which is that world governments adopted a decision to promote gender balance and improve the participation of women in the climate change negotiating process. And what this means is that governments are going to work towards striving to have a more gender balance in climate negotiations, which have traditionally been very male dominated in the past, and then they recognize that this is a problem and needs to be rectified. And one of the interesting things that's going to happen at the end of this year at the Climate Change Conference in Lima, Peru, is that governments are going to talk about capacity building activities, how to enhance women's leadership, and how to get their technical and negotiating skills up so that women can play a stronger role in these climate change negotiations. And for me, one of the most inspiring things is that, I don't know if you're aware, but the head of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat is a woman, Cristiana Figueres. And she's a very inspiring woman. She's a mentor, and she is really pushing this idea of gender equality and making sure that this is something that all governments really work hard on, and that women absolutely have to be playing a leadership role in action on climate change.
Can I?
Oh, and Nyla. We'll go Jody and then Nyla.
Yeah, sure.
This is, you know, I think that this is probably one of the most interesting areas of all, because, you know, at least in the United States, quotas, you know, we're such Marlboro men, you know, it's disgusting. Quotas are never seen very well, but what you are seeing is this notion of capacity building, and you're seeing it at every level. You're seeing IBM, who has these tremendous work development programs for women to teach them board-based leadership skills, to teach them senior-level leadership skills. You have companies that tie compensation to the diversity of the pipeline, and so their bonuses or their compensation is tied to how many women they have in the pipeline, how many people, if they bring forth 3 candidates, one of them has to be a woman. And I think, and then you're seeing tremendous, the ROI on companies that, I'm going to look for it, I have it here on my thing, the ROI, a 2010 Deloitte survey said that they surveyed 330 global C-suite execs, and they Fortune 500 companies that had at least 3 women directors, their ROI on invested capital went up 66%, their sales went up 42%, and their equity increased by 53%. And that's what's going to drive change. People talk about, you know, diversity and affirmative action and things like that, but if you can say, if you have 3 women on your board and your sales have increased 42% and your equity increased by 53%, it takes all the mystery out of the decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Nyla?
Hi, I just want to address 2 things, like going back to Bangladesh. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yeah. The basic platform to even get connected with, like, when I thank UN Women and Women's Empowerment Principle of all these networking, there are millions of women sitting there who doesn't have access to this and whose life would change just by networking and the mentorship you all give. And it itself is such a big sort of opportunity for them to get up. And when we say, like, there was a question which said that how do half of the time gets wasted trying to find out source, how to get connected. This was one of the biggest issue in Bangladesh, that how do we get connected to even know all these things. So one sort of, it was an advice that if mobile could be the center of getting information, how do we utilize it in the best way of connecting? Looking at leaders, women leaders, corporate leaders, and everybody, all they need in a country like ours is like mentorship and best practices and sharing of what the wealth you all have over here, because knowing what is right and what could go wrong, this simple factor they miss out, and they keep on repeating this, there's no guidance they have. And the biggest thing they could have is, like, I would say, when we talk about women leaders, they can get up much more if they have mentorship from leaders like corporate leaders like you all. And this, I would think it's the biggest strength for a woman, to hold hands and let others come up also. In a country like Bangladesh, this is completely a privilege. And I realized, like, Africa is a very beautiful example to see. But if you see government policy, everything is pulling, no matter, we have opposition leader women and our leader woman, but still there's no basic right which can set an example which we can follow. Because it is a place where it's still the highest of, acid victims and all that. It reflects our society in a way where we need much more help than we are talking about. And technology can take us and bring us together, but a mere existence is at risk, when we talk a lot. Because then there are political people who would be after us also. I work with acid survivors, so I know how many people are after me, where they can bring me down so that I cannot, like, I'm making people live so that they live 100 times better than what they were. And these are the society people, strong people, who would want to see these girls die. And we are pulling them out, giving them technology skill and making them go somewhere in the world. Some of the girls have gone to Sweden and they formed their own business and pulling others out. And this is something even women at times pull you down, because it's so much poverty. They need technology, knowledge, network, support, everything together to come up. And I realize that we are privileged to be talking, to be learning from each other, where they lack all these simple things,
Thank you.
And how do we sort of cross this barrier to come to where we are,
Thank you so much, Naila. So we only have a few minutes left. So we wanted to give each of you an opportunity to say some final words. And maybe since we haven't been able to tackle all of the questions, there are some recurrence in these questions that maybe you can tackle in your final comments. One is really, what are the largest, if you were to pick one barrier that you would overcome for women in power and leadership and decision making, what would be that barrier that you would wish to remove for women? How can we encourage young women to become leaders and decision makers and promoters of gender equality and women's empowerment in that agenda? Talking a little bit about the transformations that you were talking about, Florence, earlier. And the third relates to the post-2015 development agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. If you were to put something critical on this agenda, what would that be? A lot of questions for just a minute per person, but you can pick and choose on the topic that you feel comfortable wrapping this discussion up with. Yes. So, Florence, would you be happy to start?
Yeah, well, it is a challenging question. What is the biggest challenge? Yeah, I don't know that you can think of which one, because they interact with each other so much that it is difficult to rank them. But I think I would like to focus on the power within each woman to overcome a lot of the environmental challenges in our societies. I think that is the biggest key we have to unlock, to free women to know and believe that they can do it, and that a lot of the challenges they face at family, at societal level, can be turned into opportunities, and that they can build alliances that that enable them to exercise their choices to become leaders and be successful at being a leader. I've seen women overcome huge odds to get the support of those who were almost violently opposed to them assuming leadership positions. And we need to learn from them and document how did they do it, where did they find the strengths, what support mechanisms did they develop. I think that is the key. Of course, a woman shouldn't be able to pay a huge price simply to exercise a fundamental human right. That's why, in addition to working to unlocking, enabling women to use the power within, we have to support them to deal with the policies and the laws and remove some of those constraining factors. But I think it is very difficult to look at it as obstacles you can rank into most and least important. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Florence. Do you want to?
And then next on our screen we see Jody. Jody, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. I think it's access to capital. I really think it's access to capital. I think women simply don't have the same level of access to capital that men do, and women are brilliant entrepreneurs. In emerging countries, you see the bulk of the entrepreneurs are women. I was just working with Mercy Corps has an incubator to develop women's business in Gaza, and they just need enough money to get mentors to work with these women who are interested in starting businesses. And so, you know, access to capital, because capital can solve a lot of problems. It can, if you don't have access to mentors and you've got the capital, you can bring the mentors over. You can do a lot. And so I think that is probably the biggest thing, which is really access to funding, because women entrepreneurs are so brilliant, and statistically, if you fund women entrepreneurs and they create businesses, then they can lift entire countries out of poverty. I think what Nyla is saying about the acid victims is really very important, and it really changed my thinking years ago when I heard her speak. So I have to give a shout out to her because it really helped me. So.
Great, so that leads us to Nyla.
Yeah, I would sort of second Jody's comment about access to capital, because fundamental human right, economic empowerment, even to hold a position in your own family, society, and community, you need access and be able to earn something to get respect in every country, and that is the root of resolving rest of the problems and cross the barriers.
Thank you.
And I would say, you know, when we work on economic empowerment, rest follows through.
Thank you, Nyla. Sarah, some final remarks from you?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to capacity building. We cannot address climate change without action, but there can be no action without capacity. You know, so unlocking that capacity, building that capacity is really important. But you know, on a positive note too, what we're seeing through the Momentum for Change initiative is that women's leadership is happening all over the world, in countries all over the world, women in developed countries, in developing countries. There's so many positive examples of women taking action from a business scale, from a grassroots scale. In 2013 alone, we had women's projects that were based in Guatemala, in Ghana, in Kenya, in South Africa, in Australia, Bangladesh. So for me, I'm just seeing a lot of hope. I'm seeing a lot of inspiration, and I am seeing that women are already leading. There are lots of examples of it. So it's happening. We definitely need it to happen at a bigger scale, and we need to replicate it, but it's definitely happening.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Lauren, do you have something to say before we close?
Yeah, just to thank everybody for being here today and joining us on this exciting discussion. Again, from our perspective, it's been a real opportunity to bring the WEPS community, so the Women's Empowerment Principles community, as well as the Global Compact community to this discussion, because I think, again, business does have a really important role to play when it comes to gender equality and women's empowerment, and vice versa. I think that women's empowerment really needs to be a key component of corporate sustainability. So thanks so much for the opportunity, and we hope to be joining more of these discussions.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you.
So, and thank you so much, everyone. Unfortunately, I think Maya was dropping out for her final remarks, but the discussion is going on and will continue on the Knowledge Gateway at empowerwomen.org. So as you leave this conversation, we hope that you are inspired with all the wealth of experience that our experts today have shared, and that you feel a little bit provoked to come in also with your own ideas and your own realities and your own countries. I had promised also to give a reference, and since Maya is not here, to the story that we were running about a program that she was talking about, the Gender Seal in UNDP. We had that story on the 10th of February 2014 this year. So if you can search for it on the platform if you want to find more about that program. But I would like to thank everyone. The discussion on our platform now will go on for 3 weeks. So there's plenty of opportunities to continue this discussion. And I would like to thank both the Global Compact for co-hosting this Google Hangout with us, and all of you experts and the participants for your excellent questions. And we hope to see more of those excellent questions in the e-discussion. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
very much. Very grateful.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.